Well, hello everyone, and as you've noticed, this is probably a different video from what you're used to seeing from me, and there's a reason for that. See, at my local woodcraft store here in Toledo, the first weekend of every month, my good friend and mentor, Dennis Laney, and I do a demonstration, and we try to spotlight on hand tools in woodworking. Well, because of the coronavirus and the social distancing, our local woodcraft store is limited on what they're doing for customers, though I believe they are still open to some extent. And Dennis and I are trying to stay in line with that social distancing. But fear not, we do have Dennis here on the phone doing FaceTime with us. So Dennis, thank you for being here.
Oh, you're welcome. It's good to be with you, Chad.
Now, before we get into the lesson, how are you actually, dealing with this whole virus issue? The family good?
Yeah, everyone's well, thanks. It's, it's on the one hand, you want to run out and just see all your friends, and you want to start building projects with them. But on the other hand, when you remember that I'm in the middle of what they call the high risk group, you act a little more enlightened. So thank God for technology, and hopefully we'll be able to use it to our advantage today and in the future if need be.
Yeah, absolutely. This is really cool. We're able to do this between you and I, but also then to be able to share it with the viewers.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Now, Toledo Woodcraft, I know you work there part-time. Are they still doing some things for customers?
No, they are, at the moment, they are closed.
Okay.
They had talked about the curbside pickup possibilities. I think they are not doing that.
Okay.
We're basically waiting until the ban is lifted on retail, and I'm sure everybody will be glad when that happens.
Well, yeah, as you know, it hit me personally hard too. My wife's business is closed, but fortunately, I don't understand why I'm busier than ever with jobs in the shop. So,
well,
hasn't
it's a good
affected
problem
me.
to have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's get right into the lesson. And the
right.
lesson today is usable hand tools. And Dennis, why don't you start us off? Tell us what's first on your list there.
Well, as we talked a little bit earlier, I kind of thought that the best way to select some of these things would be hand tools that I use on a very, very frequent basis. I would probably say that I use them daily, although as of late, I'm not working daily. I'm kind of taking life easy. As I told you earlier, playing the banjo is a lot easier to do than coming out here and turning the heater on. But I've got the stuff laid out on my bench, kind of in marking and measuring, and then some layout, tools that I use for squaring up. And then I use an awful lot of scrapers, as you do. So I've got some scrapers here. We all have to do a little bit of boring. Try not to be boring at times, but I've just got one little boring tool. I think you probably have a few more out than I do. And then I've got some shearing tools. So if that kind of matches up with you, we can kind of go through, those particular tools and give people some idea of what they look like, what they are, and how we use them.
Yeah, absolutely. I bet we have a lot of the same tools here on our bench to talk about, but I bet we probably have either different methods for using some of them, or maybe even different makes and manufacturers. So
right.
Let's just see. What's your first one you got there?
Well, let me see if I can turn this around. I think I can.
Oh yeah.
I'm trying not to show you my dirty shop. This item right here, of course, is just a standard caliper, a dial caliper. And this particular one is marked off in imperial, so it's marked off at 64ths of an inch. That's very helpful in terms of measuring things, setting dividers, so on and so forth. One thing that we're always doing is trying to determine what angles are. So this is just a little standard general protractor that I've had laying around here for years. You can barely see the gauge marks, but with the help of a magnifying glass, I can still read it. The next thing I have here is an engineer scale, and although, as you and I have both said ad nauseum, neither one of us like to work off of prints, but there is the occasional time that we do have to read something that's in scale. So this is just a very small 6-inch engineer scale, or an architect scale, excuse me, and it reads in the standard 1/8, quarter, 16th, and then full measure. I've got a little 6-inch Starrett. This is tricky because I'm trying to hold the phone and hold tools at the same time. We're not quite that technically advanced. But this is a nice little scale. It's marked off 30 seconds, 64 sixteenths on the other side. It's a Starrett, which, a lot of people are Starrett collectors, but this happens to be a very useful little scale. All the graduation marks are etched in a little bit. So if you're setting a set of dividers to them, you've got something to grip. Of course, the next thing that I have is a compass, and this is a Starrett compass, quite desirable amongst collectors of Starrett tools and compasses. And compasses are great for not only for...
What you mean by that is, at some point, that's going to become mine, right?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, exactly. Right. Compasses, of course, are very useful when you're not only drawing circles, but when you're striking arcs, when you're dividing angles. There's any number of uses for compasses. And the other thing that they're very, very useful for guys like you and I is you can shorten up the lead of the pencil, and they become wonderful scribing tools.
Yeah.
The next set of things, again, another Starrett tool. I pull out all my Starrett tools for this demonstration. This is an 8-inch set of dividers. And again, dividers are wonderfully useful tools. They'll do most everything. They will do everything that you can do with a compass, but they're also used for setting out. And when I say that, you can take an increment, and simply by moving or by swinging the dividers, you can lay out a line in given increments. The next couple of things I've got probably are falling into the area of kind of layout, and it would be some gauges and some squares. What do you got in your marking and measuring stuff?
Yeah, let me show you what I got right now. All right, so a lot of my list had your similar things on it, which was dividers and compass. And as you brought out, these are more than just making circles. You can actually find the middle of a line. You can make right angles. And if you'd like to see more uses of a compass in action, you can check out a video that I have in the description below there, and it'll really show you how this is a useful tool. The next tool that I like to use a lot is a folding ruler. Now, this is a pretty old one. Actually, I was given this by a customer out on a job site, but I like the folding rulers a lot. This one I carry with me all the time. Because most of the time I'm not measuring long pieces of wood like a 25-foot long tape measure. So this is something that I can pull out real quick, measure my stock. Maybe I have to measure my fence away from the blade on my table saw. It's just real handy to have, and if it doesn't fit in a pouch, it fits in your back pocket just great. Another tool for marking and measuring is I love this 6-inch combination square. Now, I know a lot of folks have the 12-inch or the 16-inch, but I really like this 6-inch one, again, because I can use it as a square to make right angles. You can use it to make a 45, but I like it too because if, let's say, I want to set my table saw blade or my router up a 1/2 inch, I can raise that right to it. It's very precise and very accurate tool that I reach for a lot. As Dennis,
of course, all your readers are wondering, is that a Starrett?
This one is not. Yeah, this one is not, just because those cost so much. And you know, most woodworkers who do this professionally for a living, we are on a fixed budget. So this one was actually a Swanson one.
Oh, yeah.
There was another brand, I won't say the name, but after about 6 months, it just wore out. It was absolute junk. Well, I'll say it. It's Empire Square. After 6 months, the screw just stripped out, and it wasn't locking in place anymore. So
yeah. It pays to, those little, especially those little combination squares, it pays to really buy as good as you can afford to buy.
Yeah, it does. But again, sometimes, you know, if someone doesn't think they're going to use it a whole lot, they might go with a cheaper one. That's usually actually how I start off. If I want to upgrade in a tool, is I'll buy the cheap one, and if I find I'm using it a lot, and it breaks, but if I just find I'm reaching for it a lot, then I'll spend the extra money and buy a real nice one.
Excuse me, Chad, but we're going through some of the same problems that major networks are going through right now. I have a black screen and it says poor connection.
Oh, okay.
So,
well, you're coming through just fine on my end, so.
Okay, well, let's keep going until I have to show and tell. So.
Okay. As you brought out, a set of calipers are very handy. And I'll use the calipers not only for, you know, measuring the thickness of something, especially when you do turning. They're great for checking the size on something that's round. But I also like to use the calipers. Let's say that you made a mortise and tenon. I can use the calipers to pinch on the tenon, and then what I can do is I can sight across it. And if I have any light coming through it, I know my tenon's not flat. And same with the other end. Let's say I want to check the depth of a mortise. On these calipers, the rear piece here extends out, so I can check down into a hole real nice with it. So definitely a handy set of calipers are a good thing to have. Oh, just one more thing. I want to come back to the folding ruler. This folding ruler actually has an extending arm on it, and this is very handy. Let's say that you want to measure the inside diameter of a drawer. You can put that in there, extend that arm out. The arm has another scale on it, and you just add the two together, and it's spot on. So this is a nice tool to have. Let's see, as far as marking gauges, did we go over marking gauges to some? This was just measuring. Did we do marking gauges yet?
No, we haven't, not yet.
Okay. You want to move to that next then?
Yeah, but right at the moment, again, I'm still in the dark. We may have to kind of break the call off and reinitiate the call.
So you can't see me. But
I can't see you.
But I can see you. Can you see?
Okay.
Can you see you in the screen?
Okay. Well, let's see if I can swing this around.
There you go.
How's that?
I can see that.
Good.
Just fine.
Okay. We want to eliminate that shot of my dirty garage. Okay. Well, the first thing, marking and layout wise, right here, I've got an old Marples mortising gauge, which I'll tell you is just one of my favorite tools. I've had this thing. I think I bought it new in 1970, and I've just used it to no end, and it's still holding up very well. We both, neither one of us are above using a mortising machine, but for the most part, and you're back. For the most part, I still hand cut all my my mortises. So this is really a very helpful tool. The next one is just a wheel type thickness gauge. This particular one is a wood river gauge, and it's really very, very good quality. It's their deluxe model. And the nice thing is that this end, I don't know if you can see it or not, the wheel will actually drop down in, so you can actually use it as a depth gauge. And when you're setting the depth of one board, you can just put it up alongside the board and drop it down. It'll give you a perfect depth. So it's very simple to use. And for me, anytime I don't have to measure something, I'm far, far better off. This is a little Veritas saddle square, which is really very helpful because you're running a square line and then you run it up over the 90 degrees to the next surface. So you don't lose your lines as you can when you're running with a regular square.
That's really nice there. Absolutely.
Yeah, they're very useful little tools. I've got an old sliding bevel, which probably is old enough that Abraham Lincoln might have owned this at one point in time. A 6-inch Marples tri-square, which I use constantly. This again was bought in about 1970, I think from probably either Frog Tools or this might actually come from Woodcraft when it was based in Woburn, Massachusetts. Then the next thing that I use a lot, because both of us are hand planers, are a set of winding sticks. And these particular sticks, I've had these for a number of years. They're just regular old pieces of 3/8 inch thick, 1.5 wide Gabon ebony, and they've held up very well. So that's it. That's it layout wise for me. I'm getting into the scrapers and so on and so forth next. So, want to talk about what you've got there for layout?
Sure. All right. So what I have for marking and layout, for a marking knife, I actually really like this flex cut chip carving knife. Now I know it's mostly used or described for doing small carving, but I find this is a great knife for marking, where I can make a scored line and then even a little trench to start my saw or hand plane on it. It works really great. I use this a lot on dovetails, mortise and tenons, and such. There is another marking gauge or marking knife that I got from Woodcraft. This is a Japanese style one, and it's actually beveled on both sides of one side and flat on the other. And what this allows me to do again is I can put the flat edge up against the surface, and I can use it either right-handed or left-handed. So a nice little tool for marking things.
By the way,
yeah,
the beauty of those single beveled knives is that the edge is pulled right into your square or whatever edge you're marking against.
Absolutely, yeah, you're right. Because if there's a bevel on both sides, sometimes you can be off just the slightest bit with your line. So great point, Dennis. Sometimes too, marking involves drilling a hole, and an awl is a great tool to have in your collection. You can use this to start a hole for either drilling or for putting a screw in. Another great tool to have. I also like this little tool. It's a spring on 2 different sizes for a punch. And this is nice because instead of using a hammer to wrap down on this, you just simply pull the string back and it makes a nice little indent on the wood exactly where you might want to start drilling. Do you have one of those, Dennis, by chance?
No. Next time in your shop, though, I may have one.
Well, I got some time to hide it with this COVID-19 going on. So. No, it's really a pretty handy tool to have. I'm surprised how, and it's nice too. Like if you're in an awkward place, a real tight place,
right,
and you can't get a hammer on the end of it, you just pull that and it strikes. So carpenters would like this.
I think you can actually even use those to set brads.
Oh yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
right.
Yeah. In fact, honestly, that is what it's used for, because it does have the two different size heads
Right.
on it. Exactly, for brads or nails. Yeah, I like I
But
said,
no,
I like
yeah,
the set.
for striking a point though, I think that's a great idea.
Okay, so what are we moving next to?
Well, I've got, let's see, I don't want to show you the dirty garage again, so I'll flip this right here. We both use scrapers a lot,
Yeah.
and I think probably scrapers, for most folks just getting into woodworking, are really kind of an unknown destination, but they really are some of the most useful tools that you can have, for working in figured stock, for taking off very small shavings when you're finishing up a dimension or what have you. But I've always got a bunch of scrapers laying around, from just a standard square card scraper. This is a combination curve, and these are available commercially. This is kind of like a French curve with a drawing curve.
Now that would be used for like moldings, if you made your own moldings and had to clean them up.
Yes, yeah, because you have a number of different edges, and this is really it's a parabolic curve, so you can come up with a whole bunch of different radiuses, and the fact that you can flip it over gives you the opposite hand of whichever. So if you're working against the grain, you've always got the option of working to keep the grain supported. This is just a number of little radiuses that allows you to work into fluting.
That's nice. I don't have one of those.
Yeah, this is a commercial thing, and these are also available. The reed side of this is also available, and these are very inexpensive. But it's easier to just purchase these than it is to have to cut this with a jeweler saw or something. And this is just a very, very basic scratch stock, and you can see that there's a little reading bit in it. I think you can see it, maybe not. There you can, yeah. This is probably one of the most useful basic tools that anybody can ever have in their shop.
And you made that, right?
I'm sorry?
You made that one?
Yeah, and there's really nothing much to it. It's just a curve through a block of wood. The block of wood is elled off. These little edges right here are just beveled to allow you to rock back and forth when you're using the scraper. But it's a very useful tool, and the amount of really fine, intricate detail that you can make with something as simple as a scratch stock is just amazing. This is a larger bit. In fact, I think that you use this particular scraper in making one of your stools for one of the stretchers.
I did.
As I did, and it just fits right into this same little scratch stock.
It's amazing. It's amazing, that subtle little detail on your furniture, whether it's that slight curve or just a little bevel here and there. It really can make or break a piece of furniture, and the reason it makes the furniture look so nice, it's another place for a shadow line to catch.
Right. Just one other scraper. In fact, this belongs to you, Chad.
Hey.
Although it may never get back until after my wake. But this is a chair devil. This is one of the scrapers that you bought when you bought your last tool chest.
It was.
And a chair devil is in fact a scraper in what appears to be a spoke shave body. But it's used to take the final spoke shave facets off of a round after it's been shaved. Very useful little tool, and I don't know if you can see the difference in it, but it has a very small little opening that allows real thin shavings to come up through. And not for everybody, but if you're doing a lot of shaving work, if you're making chair legs and so on and so forth, boy, a chair devil is really a useful tool.
And that one was handmade by the craftsman, wasn't it?
I believe it was, yeah. They're pretty straightforward, pretty simple tools to make. Anybody with just a minimum of hand tools can make one of these, and they really are very, very useful tools. somebody has an interest in making one, we can kind of direct them as to some useful information that they can use to make one. Now I'm getting into my real specialty tools. One of the tools that I'm not sure you can really call it a tool. Well, it is. It's a simple machine, is what it is. Somebody might look at this and say, "Oh, yeah, that's a shim for shimming up jams," and indeed, that is what it's for. It's nothing more than just a simple pine shim. However, it's a wedge. And a wedge is a simple machine, and it has an amazing number of uses around the shop. So you'll always, in fact, there'll be times when I will be running around here just in a terrible panic because I can't find a wedge when I need it.
A classic case for where you need the wedge is if you have some tension in the wood and you're cutting it on the bandsaw and it starts to pinch together on you as it's coming through the blade. That's where I love to take a wedge and just slam it between the kerf on that.
Oh, yeah, and I would say not simply the bandsaw. I mean, even if you're using a panel saw, a hand saw, a lot of times you'll want to wedge it to open it up.
Yeah.
Here's another thing that I just picked up on right here. This, people would say, what do you use this for? And I would tell them that at my age, I'm getting to the point that I need to be able to take this little flashlight to see what I'm doing a great many times. So this is an underrated tool, but it's always on the workbench at my house.
Oh, it's amazing. If you have to get up in, underneath a bench or into a cabinet or something like that, it's amazing the tight corners sometimes you have to get into, and that little flashlight definitely is a lifesaver.
Yeah, absolutely. This, going back to our boring discussion, is just a little Yankee drill. This I picked up in the early 1970s, and I think it probably was, at one point in time, it probably belonged to the Ohio Bell Company. This comes, as you mentioned earlier, with a number of different diameter bits and a couple of different types of bits. There are some just straight fluted bits, and there are some actual twist bits that are available with this. These are still available. It's really basically a reciprocal hand drill. And for drilling things like pilot holes, for square cut nails, any nail that may be in a situation where it could drive through the fiber in a piece of wood and split it, you can always drill start holes with it. Really handy little device to have on the bench. I get into some shearing tools now. Of course, this is a knife. This is a double beveled knife, double beveled knife that I use for marking a great deal of the time. This particular one it belongs in with my carving chisels, but it's on the bench right now and it works great. I tend to have an awful lot of knives laying around. I use knives a lot for final trimming work. This is a Scandia grind knife. It's a Puko, a finish knife. And the Scandia grind is just a single grind. There's no secondary bevel on it. So it requires a little bit more maintenance, but it can be gotten very, very sharp. And I use this for trimming different finish pieces. Where it really comes in handy is if you're hanging crown molding and you have to relieve the belly on the bead of the crown. And you know exactly what I'm talking about, Chad. Anybody that's ever coped in crown molding will understand. This is really a wonderful shape, a wonderful tool to use for relieving that belly. I don't have many Lee Nielsen planes anymore. I got rid of my collection of Lee Nielsen a long time ago. This one I've always had. I think this was the first Lee Nielsen plane that I bought. It's a rabbit block plane. The newer ones now have knickers on them that'll score ahead of the blade when you're cutting cross grain. This is probably the most useful plane that I have, and not only the most useful, it's the most used. Just for all sorts of trim work. You can take off very fine shavings with it. But again, just a really useful shearing tool. This is a coffin smoother, which is a traditional beechwood smoother. This particular one is a new one that's made by E.C. Emmerich in Germany. It's a double bit, meaning that it has a chip breaker on it on the blade, but it's very useful if you're trimming up smaller pieces of wood. You don't want to go to the planer or the joiner, or if you have something that's just too small to physically be safe in running them through one of the power tools. The other thing is I always have a couple of chisels laying around, just like you do. This is an old buck 1-inch chisel. It's a firmer design without bevels on the side of the blade. It's a register chisel, meaning that it's tapered finely in length, so you can use it for mortising or for mortise cheeks, which is in fact where the name comes from. It allows you to create a register surface. There's a 1-inch and a 2-inch always laying here on the bench. That's about it for my shearing stuff. So now it's time to show us yours.
Actually, Dennis, you were the one who kind of turned me on to using a knife more in my shop. In fact, again, in my little pouch here, this is one that you gave me. And there are just a ton of uses for a knife. Once you start carrying one on you in the shop, you'll find so many things for it. And one of the things that I will like to do is if I make a cross cut on a board and if it's rough, I can real quick just take off any kind of rough edge or slivers to avoid that in myself, as well as cutting string and opening packages that come from Amazon and whatnot. There are just countless uses that I constantly am reaching for the knife for. Another tool that I like to use quite a bit is a spoke shave. This one here is a rather old one. It's a C.H. Weston from 1858, I believe. And obviously a spoke shave is essentially a smaller version of a plane. We have the two handles on it, and we can remove shavings bigger and faster than what a card scraper would do. And you can use it to make square objects round. But again, another real handy reason for having one is if you just want to make a quick chamfer on the edge of a board, you just want to knock off that square edge, you can run it on there a couple of times and slightly round over that corner. Another tool that you had me thinking of, Dennis, when you were showing off yours was this Shinto rasp. This essentially is like a bunch of bandsaw blades all grouped together. It has fine teeth on one side and coarse on the other. Again, this is something that you can, if you have a big piece of square stock, you can remove quite a bit with it. I also like it too because if I have to fine-tune a tenon, I can put that on there, keep it flat, and shave some material off. This is something that I actually have two of. I have one that I keep here in the shop, and I have one on the van if I'm working out on job sites. I just use it that much. Chisels, Dennis was talking about chisels. I have this 2-inch Irwin chisel. I love this thing. Again, I don't even have a place to put it. It just stays on my bench all the time. I use it so much. And I can remove a lot of material real fast with it, just to get rid of that waste. But I also like it too because if I'm doing some trim work and I gotta shave off just a little bit, this thing can act like a guillotine and just slice off very thin, very small, accurate pieces of wood. Great for if you're doing some shoe molding and say that corner is not 90 degrees, but you cut your piece at 45, but maybe it really needs to be 46 or 44. You can use that chisel to shave just that small amount off. Another tool that I like to use a lot is a router plane. The router plane has a single blade in it, and you can adjust the depth down. And where this comes in handy is, let's say that you want to make a dado on this board. I can take a handsaw and cut down to the mark I want. I can then use a chisel to remove most of that waste, but it's not going to be real accurate, that chisel. You're going to have some highs and lows in that valley, and that's where the router plane can go through and clean that up, get that bottom surface totally flat, just real accurate, real precise. And I did a video a while ago where you can make your own router plane. This one was made out of a block of wood. The blade I use is just a small little Allen wrench that I sharpened. And I really like this one a lot because if I'm doing carving and I have some small relief areas in between the profiles, I can get that down in there and flatten that surface, get it all even so the carving looks really nice and clean when it's done. Another plane that, Dennis, you had your Lee Nielsen rabbit plane. This is the Wood River rabbit plane that I use a fair amount. It's amazing how many times once you have a tool, you'll find yourself reaching for it over and over again. And this is one that I liked quite a bit when I got it. This hand plane is a little bit interesting. This one actually looks like it would be rather non-productive because it handles at both ends. But this is actually a hand plane that was made for tongue and groove for floorboards. And so if you push it the one direction, it's going to form a tongue, and then you would simply turn the plane around and push it the other direction, and it forms the groove in the board, thereby giving us a tongue and groove. Now, it's not like I'm making a lot of tongue and groove flooring in my shop, but where I found it's really nice is if I want to make grooves, especially on these boxes. This is a little shaker style box, and I have the groove there for the lid, and of course there's a groove to put the bottom in. I can form the tongue with it. So it's a nice little hand plane that I reach for time and time again. The last little plane I wanted to show, and honestly, Dennis, this is just, you know, one of those things because you and I both love hand planes. I collect them. I stopped counting after 200. But we all know that the Stanley #1 is kind of like the holy grail that every collector wants to have in their collection. And I probably will never be able to afford one in my lifetime. However, I gotta say, I don't even know if I showed this one to you yet. Wood River has come out with a #1. Yeah. And it's just the cutest, most adorable little thing. I'll never use it, but
those are the right adjectives. Adorable, cute, yeah.
And non-useful.
Well, I suppose. Well, yeah. Well, you know, it's more of a work of art. It's to be admired.
It is. It is, because I mean, like, I can't even literally get a finger through on the handle to hold it. It's not even comfortable to hold for like a block plane. You know, it's utterly useless. But God, I love this thing. So I was thrilled to get that. So. That is what I think I have for tools. Oh, no, I wanted to talk. Did you have anything else? I did have a couple more things to show.
Well, you know, one thing we didn't, we're kind of doing this on the fly.
Yeah.
Extemporaneous is the word of the day here. What we didn't really talk about were saws, but both you and I use hand saws very, very frequently. And that may be the subject for a whole different video. But if there's anything saw-wise you want to throw out there, it may be something. I don't know how much more time we need for this particular demo, but
you know what? We talked some about saws in our last demo,
Yes, right.
And so I have to take that into consideration because some viewers that are watching this either on YouTube or Facebook, they haven't seen our previous demos we did the other months.
Right.
And so maybe if this goes over well and the other woodcraft stores maybe kind of get on board too with this, because we're doing this out as a favor for our local woodcraft and our local patrons that come to the Toledo store. Because actually it was kind of funny because the woodcraft store was saying they were getting calls in asking if we were still going to do this, and that's kind of what made us decide to try and figure out how to do it through the video. But we could probably revisit that that thing again. The couple of last tools I just wanted to talk about was mallets. Mallets are a tool that is a necessity in the shop. This one here obviously has a nice big block head to it, and the mallet, a lot of people didn't know this, but the mallet back in the day was made specifically for the carpenter or the woodworker. And the reason I say that is because the size of the head of the mallet and the length of your arm, that determined what this angle was on it. And so if you're a real short guy with a very large mallet, that was going to be at a different angle because the idea was it was supposed to come down flat and square once it hit the work surface. So that's one style. Another style mallet is this round turned one here. And I was very fortunate, my good friend Gerald Vance over there at the Appalachian Workshop, he made this one for me. I don't know if you can see it, but it actually has my name on it. And this is good for chiseling. When you're doing carving and stuff and you just need the chisel a little bit out, you can choke tight up on this and do your carving or chiseling with it. And then the last one, it's not a mallet, actually is a hammer. This one is very near and dear to me. This has been in my family for 4 generations. And I didn't know what it was at first, Dennis, and I actually had to reach out and contact the company that's still around. It's a saddler's hammer for horse saddles. And I actually thought it was for upholstery because the head of this tapers down, which is great for getting real small brads started so you don't smash your fingers. And then you can turn it around and drive it home. I imagine there must have been something similar like that on a horse saddle. But one of the reasons I like to use this hammer is on some of these hand planes that I have, the wooden wedge in it can be rather small, and this is great for just snugging it up. I can tap that down in there. It's a lot easier than a large hammer. So that's what I had for just some of our usable hand tools, and hopefully the other stores and the other viewers will appreciate the series. Dennis, actually a lot of people have watched our hand plane series videos, and so many of them are anxious for us to do the tuning up of the hand plane, taking a greasy, grimy garage sale find and making it just perform. So I have told them we will be doing that, but it might be something we have to resume after this.
Either that or until we get a positive air pack system that we can both look like spacemen, as we tune up our hand planes. Yeah. We'll come up with something, I'm sure.
So if you all have any questions out there, feel free to put them in the description box or the comment box below, and we'll do our best to answer them. And if you have any ideas on some future hand tool videos that you would like to see Dennis and I do together to help educate and teach you, we'd be happy to do that. Dennis, you got anything else you want to close out and say?
Nope. I can't help but think, though, if we're going to do more of this kind of setup right here, I'm going to have to get some better light because it's shining off the top of my head. So, but no, it's always fun, buddy.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for tuning in and watching. After all, our whole goal is to make you a better woodworker. So until next time, thanks so much, and keep on dancing.